ITOC Committee, May 8th, 2019.
Wednesday, May 8th. ITOC. Welcome, everybody. We'll move straight to we have Hassan here. I'm going to respect his time. We'll go to 1, 2, and then we'll go to Hassan. We'll move 7 and 8 up, and then move forward. So, item number 1 is the approval of last month's meeting minutes. Jonathan?
I did read them. I saw nothing wrong with them, so I move approval.
Excellent.
Second.
All right, anybody have any corrections or edits to it? All those in favor? All right, unanimous. Item number 2. I don't have any public speaker slips. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak? Committee members, Stuart, if you can introduce our new
Sure. I also, in addition to serving here on the ITOC, have the honor of serving on the Sandag Audit Committee, and wanted to introduce, as one of the functions of the Audit Committee, we hired an independent performance analyst, Mary Kay, who is here with us today after about a month or so on the job now.
Yes, about a month.
And I don't know if you wanted to just briefly
Sure.
tell us a little bit about you and how it's been so far.
For having me here. It's exciting so far this month. I've been learning a lot about Sandag and identifying a lot of hot spots, should we call them, in the environment at this point. My plan is to, I've already met with the internal auditor to make sure there's no duplication of efforts. One of the things we don't want to do in my role here is not do what someone else is already doing around auditing. So enhance things that aren't being done and look for gaps in areas or in programs. So I've just been learning the environment a lot. I've been meeting with board members and committees and talking about risk and from their perception what they see as risky. I'm going to be meeting with Stuart this afternoon, and I welcome and invite any board member or committee member who wants to meet with me and discuss risk in general from their perspective, to add to this kind of bowl of risks that I come up with to help me develop my 2-year audit plan and business plan to contribute to the success of Sandag. Any questions? I can be happy to answer.
How do we say your last name?
Coach Moshrab.
Okay.
So everyone's calling me Mary Kay.
Oh, that's it.
Took the easy way out.
So.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
could I ask Mary Kay exactly what your audit functions will be with Sandag, with ITOC, etc.?
Right.
You're going beyond, are you still with Transnet, or are you going beyond it?
Beyond it. So
That's what
it's
I
sort of
thought.
like Sandag as a whole, and that can include aspects of Transnet and gaps that maybe once I meet with, I do want to meet with the auditors, the ITOC auditors, to see where they view risk. I've read some of their reports and some of their recommendations, so it might be that I pull a scope of a review from those recommendations to see, you know, is Sandag implementing what's being recommended in various audits? The same with other audit functions that are being done externally as well as internally. And then from there, I do an overall, first things first, right, is an organizational-wide risk assessment. And that comes from meeting with various board members and committee members and getting their views and perspectives around what they see as risky or their hot spots. And then also meeting with individuals throughout the organization, including staff and management, to see where their hot spots are at, right? So we know already the hot spots that have been identified all over news, right? We're all aware of those.
Yes.
But what about what hasn't been discussed, or other perceptions or other views? So bringing that out and taking a proactive approach to auditing around that to make sure there isn't anything else we're missing, and then kind of making a plan from that.
All right.
So it will be a complement to the audits that are already going on from a high level perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here, Mary. Looking forward to working with you. Anything you need from us, I'm sure all of us will be happy to help.
Okay, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so I'm going to skip. We're going to do Chair's Report, items 7 and 8 next. Hassan is here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all of how many of you attended the 26th meeting? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for those who missed it. So the 26th, we presented to the board our initial thoughts of what the regional transportation plan will look like. And it's been exciting since then. You know?
Tell me the look on your face.
People went on TV and said, God dang it. And by the way, people held the press conference at the lagoon on the I-5 coast corridor, where we're double tracking the rail, we're building an HOV on the 5, we're restoring the lagoon, and that man there is guilty of that. So, and that's, without Sandag, that will not happen. And the same press conference, the release of press conference said Sandag is unworthy, untrustworthy. That's hypocrisy at its best. And I'm gonna make sure the board knows this. When you talk about an agency and you say it's untrustworthy, you're telling the 370 men and women here that you are untrustworthy. This agency is trustworthy, deliver the great stuff. I wish people should, and I will call anybody. I mean, that's a red line for me. You can call me any names you want. I've been called so many names, but when it comes to calling the agency and the staff, that's unacceptable. A lot of statements being made, promises made, and Mary is here to listen to this now. She's going to say, oh, okay, I have an idea. Promises made, promises kept. There were no promises made in Transnet. Transnet has a list of projects, and rightly so, the ordinance told the board, like, things change between 2004 and 2048, and we're going to give you the right to reauthorize the project if you need to because of changing technologies on time, with a 2/3 vote. And this agency, by the way, 3 years ago exercised that by purchasing the 125 toll road from a private entity.
Yes, right.
I didn't see a noise saying promises made, promises not kept. So we seems to be campaigning or having, campaign slogans, but it's fine with me. You do whatever you want, but when it comes to saying an whole agency with its people untrustworthy, and you're standing next to one of the most important projects that this agency delivered, is hypocrisy. Just want to make sure you know. I went on TV yesterday to make the points that they said, well, Sandag diverted money from this project to transit projects. Did we divert money today?
No.
There is no money to divert. I just told them 2 months ago we're broke. We're $10 billion in the hole. And that's what I told the media yesterday. Getting back to the plan, I will tell you this. There is more excitement about this public policy debate. By the way, I thank all the people who've been making that statement, even though it's not factual, but it's creating the public policy debate that this region deserves and needs. We need to debate the future. We need to be able to accept each other's differing opinion. What people missed about the 26th meeting is this vision. Yes, it is heavy on transit, and it should be. And it will build the state-of-the-art transit system. But it also said, let us not have the transit versus highway. This is a transportation system. And the highways will get more capacity than any of these 14 projects will ever do. Through technological advances, through some addition somewhere, through some pricing mechanism, through managed lane strategies. By the end of the day, we're going to get complete corridors that work for the people, give them choices. If they drive, it's fine. If they take the transit, it's fine. But it's a system that works together. So that's the plan. I think people just picked what they want from the plan. most people said, well, I really support the vision, but I didn't get my lane here. Let me make it very clear. I will not put in front of the board. I'm not a decision maker. My team and I would recommend. I will not put in front of the board any pure adding a lane to a freeway. Because that's the wrong strategy. We need to learn from Los Angeles, Seattle, and Houston. Los Angeles thought they used to be known as the Sultan of Sprawl. They thought they're going to build their way out of congestion. They realized, not in time, but soon enough, that they couldn't do that. That's why the voter said, here is $120 billion for the next 30 years, fix it. Seattle, 2016, same thing, $54 billion, fix it. Houston built the 26-lane freeway, the largest in the world. It was one of the most congested just a few months after it opened. You cannot build your way out. We need to learn from this region and know that the highway is important, will continue to be important. Adding capacity to it is important, but we need to have choices. So our plan is focus on complete corridors, a vision that builds a state-of-the-art transit, not a light rail or a bus transit, but a high-speed commuter and subway system, underground and above ground. And we talked about, we showed the map, what would that look like. And our team, as we speak, is putting the meat on the bone of what these look like. By November, we'll come back to the board and tell them more information and an idea about the cost, which is going to be a lot of money. And then we'll move forward. One thing is going to happen between now and November is probably in a couple of months I'm going to go ask the board to add several projects to the Transnet program that are not a part of the Transnet today. Some like the Grand Central Station, some of the transit lines, the Del Mar Bluff that we're trying to fix once and for all. And once we maybe additional vehicles for the coaster, once we add this project, a couple of months after that, we have about $300 million available to us, mostly federal funds, 250 I believe federal and 50 Transnet. I'm going to ask the board to appropriate this to clear some of the projects so we have it ready in case funding comes in. You know, it's exciting. It's really exciting to have the debate, and I've been talking to groups, and I never been to groups so excited about the debate and the potential. And the same question keep coming up is, oh, you think they're gonna still keep you? Don't really care. We're gonna do what we have to do. My team and I is gonna put. And by the way, I just started here. This team has a track record like none others. This team delivered the Mid-Coast and the I-5 corridor work and delivered the I-15. So the Sandag have a history of delivering a system that's an example to the rest of the country and the world. And for somebody to say it's untrustworthy and standing on the same project that they deliver is beyond even description. So that's on the plan. On the airport, we are meeting toward the end of this month. This is one more meeting before last. We are ready. We're still on schedule to deliver a conceptual framework with some analysis of what would the people mover look. What would the Grand Central look like? I believe the Navy is very close to making a decision to enter into some memorandum agreement or understanding with us. I'm very pleased with the progress that our engineers and planning are making, but also pleased with the way the discussion going with the Navy. I will give you more information at the next meeting because the subcommittee meeting will happen this month. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to take any questions.
This may be a request for sort of a clarification more than an actual question. Last year, the ITOC delivered its triennial performance report, and I'm sure as everyone in the room who closely read that will remember, we had a handful of what we characterized as critical recommendations, and one of which was going forward that there be more focus on outcomes as opposed to outputs. In other words, building projects is output, but outcomes is really what's in the interest of the taxpayer. And I think you alluded to this, but I just wanted the clarification. So, you know, in representing the taxpayers, I think we may have one or more North County folks. I don't think we have anybody from East County. But would it be fair to say that oh, you're an East County person? Sorry, okay. Well, then maybe you should raise this. But, you know, for those folks who so far have been, you know, objecting and raising questions about you're forgetting about us in this transit-heavy plan, would you characterize that what you're really trying to do, you know, for those folks as well as everybody else in the county is in fact focus on the outcomes as opposed to building a specific project or what have you, which may or may not deliver on outcomes? That the focus is, you're going back to the ordinance, reducing congestion and improving safety, so that you're intending to deliver those things.
Absolutely. I will tell you this. And I will challenge anybody to say that there is facts to the contrary. If I were right now, if Jim has the money and he will build the 14 projects that's still in the transit, listed in the transit, the outcome would be a year later exactly the same way we have it today. Transit ridership is 1.5%, congestion in the same space, etc. As opposed to the plan we're doing will provide the following outcome. One, if San Diego chooses to take a transit, it will be as fast, if not faster, than the car. Two, transit mode split will move to double digit. And three, capacity on the highway system will improve by 30%. These are outcomes that we're going to live by after we put a plan together. And one thing we keep forgetting, the most important job for me and my team is to make sure this agency meets the law of the land. This agency has a responsibility to meet state mandates and federal mandates. And I can tell you, if I were to build the 14th project, I'll go the other way. And people don't mention that. I find it interesting, trying to choose the right word, that people say, the county, for example, the county of San Diego said, oh, we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. On the other hand, they're saying, San Diego, you need to build this project, not other project, which increases greenhouse gas emissions. Now we have to, San Diego cannot stand in the way of San Diego. It will be devastating for this region if this agency does not comply with federal and state laws. Then no project will move forward, period. Even if we had our own money, by law, we have to have a confirming plan that meets the requirement. And so yes, it is outcome oriented. The East County,
I'm gonna move.
You know, I understand. I drove the 52. It's congested. I go to East County to do a lot of shopping. There's a lot of nice shish kebabs there somewhere. I understand it's congested. But I also understand that if even I have the resources and add a lane on the 52, a year later we're back to where we started. But instead I'm adding a commuter rail, a high-speed rail, I'm adding capacity, maybe a managed lane, combine it with an existing lane, because one managed lane doesn't work. You have to have at least two for it to work. And then maybe dynamic pricing, maybe connected vehicle technology, make space available for them. The technology exists today. This way, the 52 becomes a true outcome-oriented corridor. That's what I need. And I think people need to give a chance for this team to develop this plan. You know, the only thing they remembered from the 26, that map with the lines in it. So we had 5 big moves. The first one was complete corridors. And maybe I should have done a better job in making sure the focus is not on the map, but on the 5 pigments. And my team and I will do a better job to explain it. But it is outcome oriented and will be as such for, and by the way, I never looked at East County, North Coastal, North Inland, South. It's one county, and it's a small county. It's the most suited county for a good transportation system. And I'm not gonna start in late, after 30 years in my career, counting votes. I'm gonna call it the way I see it, and let the politics play itself out. But that's a very important point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. Okay. On to item 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all on consent. One of them is a recommendation, item number 4, which is the Smart Growth Incentive Program, Metro Transportation Grant Program. I think City of La Mesa has an extension request for not undue reasons. Working with CPUC, or I forget which one it is, Public Utilities Commission, any regulatory agency is never fun. Do we have any reason to pull these off the consent?
Or do you want to give them a chance? They're here, so.
Yeah, you came all the way. You want to
I just want to say, since the last,
come up today? Just because they're speakers.
okay, just since the last time request was approved, it actually took us another 6 months to get approval from CPUC. So we received that in January. Following that, we proceeded to put the project out to bid. Bids came in slightly higher than we expected, so we are repackaging. And as the letter before you states, we're also coming together with a developer on an adjacent property to work with us to help us with some of the improvements. So we expect a lot of that to come together in the next month or two and to be back out to bid. And with the 12-month extension, have everything built by June 30th, 2020.
And also, if I can just add, since the first extension, there has been a phase of the project that they have been completed that didn't have to have that agreement with the CPUC. And they also prepared some slides, if you'd like to see them, to see what the project looks like. It's up to you.
And the first, yeah, so exactly, the first phase of the project has already been completed, substantially complete. So we are moving on to phase 2 and 3, which will be covered by the SANDAG grant.
I don't need to. I mean, speaking as a public agency, I empathize with you. Bids come back way higher than engineers' estimates. No offense, Jim. And then working with the different regulatory agencies, I don't see a reason why we would not approve this.
We actually have 3 of them.
Three agencies that you're working with?
Caltrans, MTS, and CPUC. We got one. We got the crossing of the freeway all done.
Excellent.
We even got pictures for you.
You guys see the pictures? I'm okay as is.
I'm okay.
We appreciate you being
Good job.
here.
Thank
I
you.
don't see a reason to pull this off consent. Anybody have anything else on items 3, 4, 5, or 6?
I have just a quick question on the item number, well, the RTIP, amendment number 4. The Bayshore Bikeway, they just exchanged the money, they moved the money around a little. But where is the Bayshore Bikeway? It says it's group
Between
project.
Coronado and IB?
So
What's
the Bayshore
location?
Bikeway goes all the way around the bay. It's
Goes
24
around the bay.
miles. Yeah.
Oh, it's not, it doesn't go, it's not a free, it does affect, oh, it goes around the.
It goes around the bay, yeah, so like all the way from Coronado down to Carroll Beach and that's the other side.
Oh,
So it's been being built in segments and this is.
So it's local in this San Diego area?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was my only question.
Sounds like God's country.
What?
Sounds like God's country.
God's country. All right, thank you. I wasn't aware of that project. Well,
We do need to vote.
Yes, please.
Right? Okay, so the motion is, or the recommendation is to approve a Smart Growth Center Program schedule extension for City of La Mesa's North Spring Street Smart Growth Corridor Project.
So moved.
Excellent. A second.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Thank you guys very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
The 2 agencies.
Thanks.
We're on to item number 9. Ariana.
So, I have just a quick update for you since your last meeting. RTIP amendments number 3 and 4, those were approved. And then you saw RTIP amendment number 3 at your last meeting, RTIP amendment number 4 just discussed. And since your last meeting, we heard our executive director talk about the special meeting that was held on April 26th regarding the new vision for the regional plan, and a few of you attended. And we also had the selection committee for the ITAC selection of new members. They held their meeting and they did reappoint 3 current ITAC members, so Chair Fuller, Ty Raymer, and also, yes, and Stuart Halper. Thank you. And then in addition, for Jonathan Seats, this is his last meeting.
Did you get a good person?
We got a good person. His name is Michael Kenny, and so his first meeting will be in June 12th, and he comes to us with a background in traffic engineering, and he actually served as an ITAC member previously a while back for about a year, and so he'll be joining us again.
Good.
And as I mentioned, this is Jonathan's last meeting, so we are definitely going to miss him and all his contributions and working with you. And we do have you scheduled to attend the June 28th board meeting where the board is going to be presenting you with a special
That will be
recognition
an honor.
for all
And it's
your work.
always good to bring in new blood and fresh ideas. Have a party. That's right. Fire, send off fireworks. He's gone. Thank you. Pleasure.
That's all I got.
That's it. Okay. Item number 10, Lisa. We're looking for appointments to the Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee.
Yes, so we typically, so this would be the start of the fiscal year 19. So the subcommittee would begin reviewing the agreed upon procedures with the auditor and any suggested changes that she has, and then work through so that it would come back to the ITAC as a whole in July to approve for the fiscal year 19 fiscal compliance audits. So typically we have 3 voting members, and then Tracy Drager would be part of the subcommittee. But of course it would be up to you, no more than 3. It could be 2 if you like, 1, whatever you choose. And we start right away typically with probably next week is when we start with the emails, maybe an introduction this week. Hey, here's what we're going to do. But we do jump into it. I'm not quite sure how much time commitment there may be. With this one, there might be a little bit more than in the past. I think we might be digging into a little bit more since we do have a new auditor this year, and when you have somebody new, they do kind of dig a little bit deeper.
Does anybody have a burning desire to volunteer?
I'm happy to do that again.
Jonathan?
No, sorry.
Would it be inappropriate to not put on our new member, but maybe as a placeholder if you would so desires? Or do we need to come up with a committee today?
It could possibly be a little confusing and overwhelming for somebody new that hasn't gone through any of the process yet. It's typically better at least when you're in, so they can understand what, some of what's going on here throughout the year. So, the outcome would be the audit.
Maybe for the benefit of other committee members, just share my own experience. I think in the past, I think there was 1 or 2 years we may have had an in-person meeting and a couple of phone calls and some email back and forth. I would characterize the time commitment as pretty modest, even recognizing, as you mentioned, that with a new auditor, maybe a little bit more so than in the past, but I found it to be pretty manageable, so I wouldn't be too intimidated by.
Right, and it's a very short period of
Yeah,
time, because
exactly.
we have like from next week through like mid-June, really, to really get all the review done and everything so that we can have the packet ready to get through our internal process for the July ITAC posting. So we don't have a lot of time, bottom
For the
line.
benefit of the new member.
I'm sorry?
For the benefit of the new member,
yes.
I will volunteer.
How many are you looking for?
We're looking for
3
up to
maximum.
3.
And I'd be willing to do it if you want 3, if you, yeah.
It's up to you. That would be great.
If you only want 2, I feel great that Kai's gonna do it.
Well done.
We each took a half, so we're around.
Okay. So do we need to make a motion then to, so I move the appointment of Stuart, Nick, and Kai to the Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee, and Tracy as well, a non-voting member.
You're gonna be in
Second
Denver
that.
every day right now.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay. So second by Stuart. So all those in favor? Unanimous.
It's my last chance.
Thank you guys for volunteering.
I got was a 1-year appointment, so I'm always, it's my last.
Last hurrah.
Okay. Item number 11 is the Transit Triennial Performance Audit and establishing a performance network with Alex.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this item is an update on the 2018 Triennial Performance Audit, the cost for the establishment of a performance framework, which kind of leads into some of the questions you've raised until some. So what we'd like to do is get some input and feedback, because we would like to commission a study to really understand what it would take to implement a performance framework. Just to give you some background, the FY 2018 included 26 what we consider parent recommendations, but some of those recommendations included sub-recommendations, bringing the total recommendations to 40. The specific recommendations are a part of Chapter 2, which included attachment number 1, which kind of highlighted some of the specific recommendations. There's 7 recommendations in that chapter. Out of those 7, there's 2 that were defined as critical that we had not addressed. Obviously, this is something that we've been thinking about and trying to organize ourselves to bring something forward to you guys for input and feedback. Excuse me. So what we'd like to do is just kind of walk you through kind of our proposed approach to commission the study. The other 2 that had been completed, just for background, include, for example, the implementation of the Plan of Excellence 7-point data work plan, which was part of chapter, that's finance chapter number 1. And the other one was the restructuring of the staff reports, which we listed as complete, and those 2 were listed as critical. And that recommendation is included in chapter 8 of the information technology. Excuse me. So as we started to look at how do we, and best way to implement the framework, what we did, and I have a couple of slides, what we did is obviously review the 7 recommendations, but we also kind of reviewed all our existing efforts in terms of performance monitoring. The idea there is to taking a better understanding of what it takes in terms of the level of resources. So then that kind of served as the proposed framework to come up with a proposed approach. So for example, here are the 7 recommendations in that chapter number 2, which highlight some key recommendations. For example, the first one calls for setting targets that we can measure the benefits of the transit progress against the transit goals. Another one here speaks to Stuart that mentioned capturing more performance outcomes. There's a number of activities and efforts that are happening at their, you could say, across agency departments, but one of the things is how can we integrate those elements into a performance framework. Another one, for example, is exploring partnerships to integrate third-party data. So there's a lot of activities happening, but the idea here is that we capture a lot of the performance metrics. In fact, at the last ITAC meeting, I believe you guys represented the state of Commute reported at InfoBit. So, but we do capture great data, but we do it kind of at a regional perspective or quarter level perspective. But one of the things that we want to examine is there's third data that's available, whether Google's or Hendrix's, So the idea is to give us some more data to, in fact, for example, set targets. So those are some of the things that we want to take a look at that. And speaking of kind of tools and data, here's just kind of some of the initial efforts that we're currently undertaking. I'm not going to go through them, but just to give you some context here. For example, there's a number of key activities on the left-hand side, and the first one here on the top is we have the transit dashboard that really kind of speaks to the project delivery tool that tracks the phasing of the project, the programming of the project, and where they're at in terms of implementation. And then we also have the ITOC annual report that the team here puts together to kind of highlights what's been achieved in the current year. And then the last one here is for example, the state of the commute effort. So we capture travel times, congestion, ridership levels, but again, it's done at a different scale. On the right-hand side, you have the performance rules. So there's been an increased emphasis on performance management by the feds, and that's in the form of 3 performance targets, which include payment and bridge, safety, and congestion. But the way that data is collected is based on a consistent methodology across really the U.S. because the idea here is they're measuring and trying to track the performance across the state. So they have their own methodology, they have their own tools to collect that, meaning different data sets. And then kind of on the bottom ones, you have the SB1 program. They also have an increased focus on the SB1 program across all their programs. And I'm highlighting here the Local Streets and Road program. And that data is requested to the local agency. So the local agencies submit that data to the SB1 program, and it's done at the scale from project initiation, submittals of grants, submittals of grants. And then you also have another program here that's led by the California League of Cities. So they do this triannual report that document payment conditions. Again, all of these efforts, in some sense, require different methodologies, different tools. So based on that, we do see a number of key takeaways. There's a lot of data that's collected throughout the region, but at different scales for different purposes. We also see there's an increase in performance management, so we see that as an opportunity. So as we commission the study, these are some of the things that we need to consider. For example, there was a mention in terms of as we accomplish the performance framework, we got to make sure that it aligns with our regional plan vision. So if we do set targets or we do set or identify outcomes, we have to make sure they align with the regional vision. On the sort of lower layer is all these tools that are coming. We've got to figure out how they integrate together, how they're applied. So there's different scales. Because the idea behind the transit audit recommendation, remember the idea is that a lot of the data that's collected or can be captured in terms of tracking performance on the freeway system because we have the PEM system, and that's sort of the basis for the state of Commute. But at the local level, we don't have these tools to capture detail specifics, so we won't be able to capture kind of cost of the effect of the project improvements mainly associated. So we do see alignment within the audit recommendations. You could say vertical alignment just within the audit, but then we also see some horizontal alignment across departments. So we see an opportunity there. In fact, there are some existing efforts that we're undertaking, for example, to understand how the data is collected, the frequency of the data, who uses the data, and we actually commissioned and got a grant to take a look at the data governance component. And once we have the data, who's going to own the data, who's going to update the data. So it's a bit complex in terms of trying to figure out how can we establish a performance framework that not only benefit the transit, but also benefit the region line. And the reason we want to do that is because we see improvements on those related activities. One of those, obviously, can we use the data to help us inform the investment decisions? Right now, excuse me. Like I mentioned earlier, we do track a large amount of information, but it's generally for trends purposes. The idea here is because of the audit is are we going to start using some of that data on us to make informed decisions. We also want to enhance kind of actionable information based on the data that we capture. So if we do start capturing information to more decision, then it's more actionable information that we could apply to the policy program. So these are some of the key, sort of 4 components that we identified on how we would enhance our existing processes as as we proceed with it, establishing through the commission, by commissioning the study to improve the performance, not only at the Transnet level program, but also at the region, agency-wide program. So one of the things as we started looking at it, so what would it take? And this is something that we came up, obviously, this can include examining our existing process. Do we have to maybe change our existing process in terms of reporting? Do we have to make adjustments along, again, across the transit program, but maybe agency-wide? Will some of these require a policy decision? So for example, if we do set targets beyond what we currently do, which is tracking performance, to inform us on decision, do we need to go back to the board? And how do we tie that target to other recommendations included in the audit report? Like for example, in the local streets and road program, we have that 70-30 recommendation we have to examine, and would that require the local agencies to submit more additional information to meet that target? And obviously people. The idea here is that we want to make sure that within the existing responsibilities or existing activities, it's done across the agency-wide by different departments. We have to examine how can we improve the processes if we would implement the performance framework. And also the tools component, and I highlighted kind of the cause and effect. Right now, our tools provide us with general characteristics of performance at the regional or quarter level, but if we really want to track and understand the benefits of the transit improvement projects, would that require a new tool? And then the data governance component, who's going to own and operate it. And then also if we start kind of inputting or getting additional information from the locals, how do we extract that? How do we achieve that? And what are the tools that we would do that and apply that? So that's something that we wanted to kind of bring to you to give us kind of your feedback and input on commissioning that study. And we do include kind of an outline of that study in attachment number 2. And here's kind of the next step. There's 3 phases. Obviously, we anticipated that we would have or complete the study within 6 to 9 months. And really the first phase is kind of detailing that outline of the study, including attachment 1, and then really getting it ready to issue a consultant task order. Obviously, it's a lot of complex. There's a lot of dynamics that we would have to examine, so we need consultant assistance. And then ideally, what we would like to do is to come back and provide kind of options to address and kind of figure out how we want to implement the performance framework. The idea here is that we would be looking, costs, provide a roadmap, and also what we'd like to do is kind of do a decision document, obviously, because this is an ongoing performance recommendation, past reports, so we kind of want to highlight through that decision document that this is the proposed approach of addressing that recommendation. And then the idea there is that we would complete it by spring of 2020. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, again, for me, this is more of a clarification thing, and appreciate all the thought and effort that's gone into trying to move this forward. The one thing that I guess I have in my head a fairly vague recollection of, it may be a solid year or 2 ago, of something that I recall being referred to as San Diego Forward. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Which I recall had a fairly granular sort of layer or series of layers of goals and metrics and benchmarks and things of that nature. And maybe that's something that has kind of been pushed aside with the new plan. But in terms of a kind of a framework, it struck me that that was very much in line with what we've been talking about in the Triennial Performance Report. So I'm kind of wondering, if that's still relevant, and how that framework does or doesn't align with this one. And then secondly, as with Ray walking into the room, and both Rays talking about their sort of focus on building up the data management, and how it's what you're talking about here might also be coordinated or not with the efforts of the 2 Rays. So maybe if you can just address those, how those different pieces do or don't relate to each other.
Yeah, it actually is being coordinated with both RAIs. Part of I mentioned there's a study that we're about to undertake that's funded by Caltrans grant that really takes a look at data governance. So that's being conducted by our team, but also in coordination with the RAI. And the idea is to examine all the tools that are available based on the existing data collection efforts that we undertake by different staff. So the idea is to kind of come up with a comprehensive and holistic approach to understand how the data is being used, and if we implement a new process in place, how that's carried out throughout the agency. So it is being coordinated. With regards to the San Diego Forward, that's the previous regional transportation plan, so it did include your goals and vision statements and the key performance metrics. So that's something that we're actually going to take a look at as part of the new RTP vision. There's a reference to some performance measures or metrics or goals that we want to achieve. So the idea is that how do we, as we carry this forward, specifically with the Transnet program, how do we align those to the Transnet vision, the RTP? So yes, that's going to be addressed as part of this work.
And what I would say is that San Diego Forward, the regional plan, the data that you have, all the umpteen, I forget how many, 23 performance metrics, that's all modeled data. So it's either forecasted data or sort of model data. And I think when we're looking at reporting on performance, we're looking at actual data, like in the field data. So it may or may, does that make sense? It may or
Well,
may,
yeah, it does. I guess maybe I misinterpreted. I had thought that part of what San Diego Forward metrics was sort of setting out some benchmarks against which performance would then be measured. So, but maybe I got it wrong. So, okay, but I appreciate the clarification.
no, I do. Yeah, I mean, I do think at the highest level, but I don't know if we've actually set up all of our performance monitoring on each of those metrics. I don't think we've been as pristine as that.
Yeah, and I guess my bottom line is, I hope in doing this work, I guess the thought that was running through my head is that hopefully it wasn't interpreted that the ITOC was asking the staff to do something, just for us that is kind of almost parallel or duplicative of the things that were being done, like I said, at least as I perceived, as part of that San Diego Forward project. So, but appreciate it, thanks.
Quick question, Alex, the middle item, issue task order. Perhaps I didn't hear what you said. Who would you issue the task order to?
We're going to consult and get some consultant assistance.
I beg your pardon?
We're going to get some consultant assistance. So once we develop the task scope of work in more detail, then we put a package together for consultants to bring somebody on board to carry out.
You'll be bringing somebody on board? You mean a consultant?
Yes. So we have a list of on-call consultants.
Okay.
So the idea is to pick from them.
Comments on the proposed key activities? I read through them. I don't have any recommendations or. How does it get paid for? Does it come out of Transnet? Does it come out of?
It comes out of Transnet, yeah, the admin.
Do we have any expectation of how much that may be?
We do have a cost. When we did our independent cost estimates, and I believe it's between 160 and 190. But we have to kind of refine that. And then also when we issue to consultants, they'll come back with kind of a reality check. But we could come back once we have a kind of definite scope of work, or I'll coordinate with our on that.
Yeah, I guess that would tighten my the question I previously asked, to ensure that this isn't somewhat duplicative of work that's otherwise being done as part of the new regional plan.
Yes. This sounds a lot like your comments to Hassan. Please, let's articulate outcomes rather than outputs. Yes.
I think, we do a lot of reporting, as Alex mentioned, and I think to the extent that we can take some of that reporting and make it better, and not necessarily spend more in what we already do, but make it more useful, more meaningful, use it to better inform our decisions, our investment decisions into what projects we're putting forward. And of course align with existing efforts like the regional plan and the vision for the regional plan.
The idea is
sorry, the idea is to kind of create a unified approach. Looking at the regional plan vision, there was a mention of outcomes, so we would examine part of that framework as well, make sure that align with the regional vision, and then also align with the recommendations in the Transnet program. And if there's existing process improvements that we can make, that's what I'm hoping that the study would give us as well.
So I have to say, in all honesty, I'm still a little bit fuzzy, and I don't mean to, harp on this, but the fact that you're saying that this would be paid for by the ITOC budget.
Oh, not the ITOC.
Oh, sorry, I thought that's what
No,
you said.
Transnet.
Oh, Transnet, sorry.
Transnet,
Okay,
yes,
never
but
mind.
not the ITOC budget.
Because to me that would have implied that perhaps this is something special for us as opposed to a more systemic kind of approach. But okay, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. I know somebody will give you a whole bunch of input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks. The draft annual report.
Yes. So let's see. So last time you saw this was at your last meeting, and your subcommittee took your comments and incorporated them. So some of the changes that you'll note, well, first of all, it's in a more final format, I guess. A little different than what you saw last time. The special note, we had a request for the special note from the ITOC to be pulled up toward the beginning of the report, which you'll note has happened now. It's on page 3 or 4, as opposed to towards the back of the annual report. The other change you'll note is that some of the key points from the special note were incorporated into the chairman's letter. And then in addition, we had a request to provide a footnote explaining, why we're headed toward this new vision. So you'll see that footnote also on page 3 underneath the special note. And then there were a number of other minor changes that you had requested. So we've incorporated those, and we're looking for any additional feedback. We did get some comments from Brad Barnum, who couldn't be here today. And mainly they were that the letter from the ITOC chair, it currently runs on to page 2 of the report, the top of page 2. So to the extent that we can shorten that up or somehow, move other things on the front page so that it all fits on one, that would be good. And I want to find the comment that we had on the other. The new realities, so again, on page, new realities, new directions, so page 3, his comment says that it seems a bit harsh, but I guess that's the reality. Do we need to say that some projects will be canceled when actually we don't know that yet? And maybe we should just say may instead of will. So we could definitely incorporate that. And any other comments or edits that you'd like to see on the next version, which would be, we would be bringing this back to you at your June meeting for your approval and then presentation to the board at the end of June.
Is there a substantive concern more than just the length of it? Substantive. Yesterday, some while back, I was worried as we go out in the future after the last talk we had, get people prepared for it. But in setting the stage, we talked yesterday, setting the stage, we kind of get back into all the number details. And if someone gets interested in it, they kind of struggle. This original concept was us one, others one. The only way it works so far is it's us one and others three. And now we're saying it's not even working with that, it's going to be us one and we're going to need 4. And is that going to get people all spun up as how the hell are we getting that mess? We're saying we need 4 to 1, and we've based everything on a 1 to 1. And we wouldn't have any of this stuff built if we hadn't had the windfall of all the others going from 1 to 4. And I'm just concerned whether we, in attempting to get them prepared for the results, get them spun up, how do we get here?
So those numbers are actually reflective of a report that we provided to the board back in February. So, yeah, it was in February. So we were providing an update to where does the program, the Transnet Major Corridors program stand in terms of its estimated finances, estimated costs as we know them today. And so, you know, a year ago, year and a half ago, when we last went to the board, we said for every dollar of Transnet, we're going to need about 3.4 of somebody else's money. With the increase in costs, and essentially the revenues not growing at the same pace, now we need over $4 versus $1 of Transnet. So that was the update that we provided to the board in February, and I think that's what this special note is just trying to reflect, you know, what we provided to the board.
My only concern is that's all factual and true, and presumably in the degree of accuracy of our ability to make forecasts for the rest of the program. I don't know how to do it, or I'd have an offer on how to present those facts without drawing attention to did someone screw up. And if we get into the mess we got before, people were looking for who screwed up, or we just bringing that bill again.
Or is it just a comment that the times have changed, costs have gone up, and you just need to kind of tell them this is what's happened?
That's the objective, to
right.
Let them know that this is coming. And then is there a way to do that without having a big debate on how did it happen?
Well,
There's probably going to be a debate anyway.
Well, yeah, and what's really coming is going to be a big plan that's going to cost a whole lot more money
So
anyway. So
instead of 4 to
this is
1,
going to
it'll
pale
be
in
more like
comparison, I think.
8 to 1.
I just raised a question on it because I've been at this issue for some time, and actually jumps out at me. Maybe it does not jump out at anybody else. It just what Craig says.
Do you think, are you saying you want to water down the issue, or are you thinking that, and I'm just asking the question of, to say it, because if you just, my opinion is just say it. That's what we're here for, just say it. We didn't necessarily create this is the issue that's just happened across the board in any, I guess, large projects that are in the country, maybe in the world right now, that they just ballooned up, but they thought they were going to cost $1 15 years ago when they came up with this. Now they're just, you know, just look at our government. The cost of that.
I just want to put it out there to make sure everybody doesn't have any concerns about it.
But I think you bring up a good point. I think the question I would just ask staff is that the role of ITOC is just to really spell out, you know, we're just overseeing this, and just spell out, this is the issue. How do we, you know, I don't know if we have the answer, that's not what we're here to necessarily come up with, but to explain to them that the cost of the balloon, we have these projects, if we can't do them all, we might have to not have some built. But I think to articulate it, I think maybe the opposite of, not the complete opposite, but I would rather just tell everybody, hey, this is what we see, this is a problem, we're letting you know that there's a problem. I don't know how we're going to fix it, but we're going to be trying to tell the board, you know, that they have a problem and they need to address it.
Mr. Chair, may I articulate or just give you a thought about another tool that you have? And Carolyn can attest to this. Hassan mentioned that we were wondering if it was legal to buy Highway 125. You folks were not here. Carolyn was here. We actually engaged the services of an attorney to study the bond measure, the tax measure, to see if it was legal to use that fund for purchasing a freeway. And we got cover from the attorney. He came back to ITOC and said, yes, it is legal. So if you folks are ever asked to opine, that's a legal term, on what is being proposed about transferring funds, you always have the tool of engaging the services of an attorney to give you a response. Right, Carolyn?
Correct.
Correct.
I don't think it's restricted to an attorney, it's any external expert.
Sir?
I don't think it's restricted to an attorney, it's any external expert.
Okay, fine. Well, we engaged the services of an attorney to give us cover. We all wanted to buy 125. We all agreed with the idea, but we did seek legal advice.
Richard, what are you seem to be concerned about this letter. What is the real concern is it that you're worried about?
You might not be remembering the flap right before the election and how Sandag's forecasted expenses were wrong. It was a major error, and it was covered up because they didn't want to, this is the allegations, it was covered up because they didn't want to influence the discussion for the next Transnet.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a lot of effort to try to educate people that even if the Sandag estimate for come up, Ray, go to work, for Transnet was wrong. I used the term, it's the wart on the tail of the dog. You're going to have a margin of error around this, and at that point in time, let's talk about the 1 and 2 making 3. As a way of defending that, okay, maybe there was an error here, but don't turn Sandag totally upside down, which is effectively what happened. Because we're out of control. We're not in control of these other big elements. We're not in control of the underlying elements, construction costs, scope changes, which is one I'm most familiar with. Almost impossible to find scope accurately 10 years out. That issue, I think, has gone to bed. And I was just concerned whether this fairly lengthy piece here, with those who might read this, might start asking questions again. That we wouldn't have made it at all, independent of errors and forecasts, because the forecast just assumed the 1 and 1. That's all. I don't seem to be concerned anybody else.
Fair enough. I'm curious. I haven't been on this that long, and so I'm just asking the question on it, because obviously there's history, and I think that's the question.
Hearing everything here, and I think going back to something Mariana touched on, I get there's in the third paragraph, there's, the second or third sentence, it says, still others will have to be canceled. I'm wondering if just softening that one sentence and saying others may have to be canceled or delayed. But, I don't think we're in a position here to say, I guess that's a little strong, that part's a little strong. I kind of support the general outline of telling it like it is in terms of what this is intended to do in terms of the shifting that's going on or the issues that are going on, but that one sentence to me seemed a little more, I don't know if we know that as strong as that.
I'd be supportive of that, because if I go back out of this discussion of law, in fact, we were trying to work on the possibilities, negative possibilities out there. Right. Funding. Right. As Guy says, we don't know those are reality.
I don't think ITAC can say others going to have to be canceled. We're not. Right. If this is our newsletter to the public, I think softening that to say, we believe they may have to be canceled or may get delayed.
Because they also, I agree with you, Nate, because they also note on the next page where they talk about the top line where they talk about reevaluating what Sandag can pay for.
They is we, by the way.
Right. But I mean, that's what we're saying that needs to be reevaluated. And I think that's, to your point, and maybe it's just some, it's the language that you're concerned about, and I think that's it sounds like it's
redesign or something.
Right. I think that's a good point.
I had the same thoughts, to soften it up a little bit, and then with the going from 1 to 4, I don't feel like it's suggesting there was an error. I think it's suggesting that the reality of construction costs is changed. I hope that it has a different, people take it differently. They'll look at it and go, oh my gosh, there's an error. They take it and go, oh, well, yeah, I know things are more expensive today than they were even 5, 6, 7 years ago.
I mean, it's the same on the business end. You had a budget and you were going to build X a project, and 5 years later, the project costs more. You might not be able to build that scope of that project. And I think that's just I think that's your point. Let them say it, but in a different way. That there was no funny,
I'm not suggesting
Well, but I think that's what the blowback was, that we're not competent, we don't know what we're doing. I think it's the point is they are competent. Things that are out of their control are happening, and we've got to reevaluate. We're helping.
So, if I could maybe be a bit presumptuous to say, it sounds like there's a bit of a consensus around the concept that, first and foremost, we want to make sure that this is factually accurate. And so if it's $4, I mean, if it is what it is. But as far as the looking to the future, also I think we want to make sure it's factually accurate. I mean, to my knowledge, there haven't been projects that actually have been canceled, or the board hasn't made decisions about that. So it sounds like couching this as more of a may as opposed to a will is really more consistent with reality.
Right.
Okay, so then I guess what I'm hearing then in the third paragraph, we would change that second sentence. Others will have their scope narrowed, still others will have to be, may have to be delayed or something along those lines.
I mean, isn't that the way they've been characterized in discussions?
If you look historically at the Transnet 1, the original transit measure, a lot of them were completed. There were 3 projects left incomplete, so they were delayed, but at the time the board and the board chose to include those in the next measure. So there's been no action taken on, whether to do that.
Remember, short of this going to the board, how is this distributed? Who is our audience? It should be the taxpayer, but
it's the board and it's the public. It's posted on the website. There's social media. There's a news release. So it's and Irene, I think, just walked in. So yeah. So So it is. It's ultimately the public.
I feel like anybody that's reading this already knows this. I wish it were so. I'd rather have. I get questions at work and exclusive projects, and there's generally a lack of knowledge and understanding of kind of what Sandag does, Transnet, the whole thing. Anything we can do to get more people educated, send it out in a different format.
Okay. So So is that the only change then, or are we still?
So I'll just say I have specific ones that I thought I would relay in the
subcommittee
meeting. In the subcommittee meeting, because they're like detailed, and I didn't think anybody needed to hear them.
I had 2 broader ones, which if I could just maybe quickly reference them. At the last meeting, something Jonathan Wise has always mentioned that just sort of stuck with me, that suggests these 2 comments. One, his point was that this is really supposed to be about the oversight role that we have, not really so much about, as enthusiastic as we all are about the great work that Sandag does. So I guess in that vein, to me, it struck me that bringing forward from behind the program highlights, the program highlights beginning on page 4 is sort of the pretty pictures, and here's what we built sort of stuff. And then the oversight things beginning, I guess, page 8, 9, 10, 11 are kind of in the back.
Okay.
And so, consistent with Jonathan's comment about that the function of the ITOC is an oversight, I would bring those oversight things forward.
Okay, so pages 8, 9, 10,
11. Yeah.
So all the audit pieces.
Right. I mean, they're not as
performance
interesting,
activity.
but they do.
Very interesting.
They are. No, I mean, the oversight.
Bring those
the
forward
audit stuff.
ahead of
But
the pictures.
but that's just my opinion. Others may disagree. But then.
I think we're vacillating on that.
We are.
It's trying to, and that's, I think we talked about that last time a little bit, and we flipped it. And I think that's what we're vacillating on, Stuart, of what, you hit it right on the head. What is the role, and what is this paper we're, sort of putting out, and what message are we sending?
Okay, well then for the committee's consideration, I'll just then put it back on the table that, to Jonathan's point, I think, again, our ITOC is intended to be an oversight committee, and so the oversight function stuff, I would vote, should be further up. And then consistent with that, on the last page, we reference, here are the critical recommendations, here are the recommendations that have been completed. As a reader, what jumps out to me is it's a little bit like you're patting yourself on the back. You're not even mentioning the ones that haven't been completed. And so, to me, I would say, look, there were there were six critical recommendations. You know, here they are. You can almost take the little box right out of the report itself, right? Here are the ones, the critical recommendations, completed yes, completed no. And that, again, to Greg's point, that just basically just tells it like it is. I think adding something like that just for sake of full disclosure makes it read in a much more balanced way. Those are things.
Any others? All right.
All right. And we'll make those changes.
We should have a final one in June.
In June,
for your
yes.
consideration.
That's right.
That was 12, correct?
Yes.
So we're gonna see it one more time?
We're gonna see it one more time.
One more time
Yes.
for approval.
Yes. You don't get off that easy.
Yeah. All right. On to item number 13, Alan, this North Coast Corridor Program update. I gotta say, I see this every day. I see those big giant holes in the median.
Yes.
What are those big holes? I'm sorry. What are those?
So there's some aerial deposited lead there, and so it's more economical to bury it and then cap it than it is to take it off site.
Got it.
So, but you have to go so far deep in order to bury it safely.
Thank you, sorry.
Throwing your nickels out the window.
No.
So, I'm Alan Kossip, I'm the I-5 Corridor Director. And just to remind folks, when we talk about North Coast Corridor, it is a 27-mile long corridor. Starts at La Jolla Village, goes all the way through Oceanside, and it was a $6 billion 40-year vision. But the good news is, as you can see from all the construction out there, we're making good progress on that vision. And we look at the projects that are completed. You think of things like I-5 Genesee was part of that vision, Carroll Canyon on the highway, a number of rail improvements such as double track at Sereno Valley, replacing the trestle at Penasquitos. We've got ongoing construction at Poinsettia Station. So we've got highway and rail, and we've also had a number of environmental improvements that have been completed and or are already under construction. So the corridor is very active. What I wanted to focus on today was what we're referring to as Build NCC, which is sort of that piece from Cardiff all the way through to Carlsbad. We've got that under one contract. It's a CMGC pilot with a joint venture, FSSW, Flatiron, Skanska, Stacy Whitbeck. So we're building about a $900 million project under that umbrella contract. And so that contract includes extending the carpool lane from Solana Beach all the way to Route 78. That's one element. Double tracking at San Alejo. A number of active transportation bike improvements, and then restoring the San Alejo Lagoon. So all that's rolled into that $900 million contract. We started construction in late 2016, early 17, so we've been out there about 2.5 years already. And the happy news is, the good news is, we're starting to see things wrap up, major elements of the project complete and available to the public. And so we wanted to start the discussion today with a little bit of overview about the good news, about what's happening out there, what's being completed. I think everyone's seen this slide before. This is what San Alejo looked like before we got there. So we've got Solana Beach over here. You've got Encinitas over here. This is San Alejo Lagoon, and you see it filling in. Almost looks a little bit like a meadow. This is what it looks like today. Contractor has completed dredging of the, we call this the East Basin and the Central Basin. You can see a major marked difference in the lagoon. Again, this is what it looked like when we started, really filling in like a pasture. Again, this is what it looks like today. And in this case, this was the dredging pit. We removed about 450,000 yards of sand, beach quality sand. We did a sand replenishment job here in front of Cardiff, also a little bit to the south. That's all completed. And then all of this material was dredged, put into the hole, and then we're going to come back and cap it because that dredging material was basically, a lot of sediment, had fertilizer and stuff running off from the urban area, and so that's why it gets capped. So good success to report on the lagoon. This is what the double track project looked like when we got there. One single track, a wood trestle. Oops, sorry. That's what it looks like today. The rail is complete, the double track is complete there. Active transportation, we've got the Cardiff Rail Trail extending, basically connecting that Cardiff area, San Alejo State Beach area to Santa Fe and Encinitas. You can see them wrapping up the last sidewalk. This is Chesterfield down there in Cardiff. This is what it looked like when we got there. That's what it's looking like today. That improvement's finished. City's very happy. This is now a quiet zone for them. The city contributed to the project. You know, you've got, if you're familiar with the area, you've got San Alejo State Beach to the west. You've got a lot of commercial food markets over here. You've got a lot of people moving back, especially in the summer, back and forth across this rail track. And so, you know, making it a lot more user-friendly, a lot more pedestrian-friendly. It's come a long way in the last 2 years. So, in celebration of all that stuff we just showed you, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, ribbon cutting, really focused on the active transportation element. The Cardiff Rail Trail is complete, as well as the double track. Those are the two things we're highlighting at tomorrow's celebration, and it's 8 o'clock tomorrow. Don't want to just move on without talking about where we are with the freeway. So this is where the current construction on the I-5. We've actually, this is about a month late. We've actually poured this bridge. So ultimately here we're adding the new lanes on both the east and west of the existing freeway. We're going to detour traffic onto the new structures. Probably get to that late summer, and then we'll tear down those existing structures and replace them. This bridge is actually poured. We're wrapping up false work on this bridge. So the bridges are moving ahead well. You can also see how much longer the existing bridge is here. So that was part of the project to improve coastal, or the tidal flushing. You can also, you know, look at how much more open water is there compared to what you saw in those earlier photos. End of last year, we started construction on the next piece of the carpool lanes, and that would extend, the next piece basically extends it all the way to Palomar Airport Road. That is under construction now, and you can see if you're up there, that's where those big pits are. And if you go back to the map I kind of glossed over quickly, we've got one last element that we're still under design, still need to break ground on, and that extends the carpool lanes from Palomar Airport Road to 78. So we're fully funded, fully budgeted, got a contractor on board, but we're delivering it to him as critical path and as we're able to complete things. So it allows us to start on the more difficult stuff on the critical path while the other stuff is wrapping up design. But good progress here as well. So basically we talk about the CMGC contract. We've delivered essentially 6 subcontracts to the joint venture. All but one, as I just said, are to them, and they're actively constructing. And you can see they're all in different percent completes. This was the project that we just put out. That's the carpool lane in the median. The double track is probably right here, about 94%, and the work at San Alejo is about 50 to 60% complete on the freeway. And then this is the last project. A couple things to point out. The base schedule was late 22 to get out of the corridor. We're trying really hard to get out by late 21 and try to bring the project in early. But that will require some funding adjustments with the California Transportation Commission that we need to work on, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in the presentation. The lagoon, I think, is another good story. We've been able to pull that project in about 7 months by the lagoon team, the part of the team that's delivering that project, ended up deleting the offshore disposal of some of that material, and so that allowed us to expedite the project, reduce cost, and also reduce environmental impacts. One of the ways we were able to do that was by having the contractor on board and by working with the contractor in a collaborative partnership. So we're big fans of how CMGC has helped us on this project. Maybe some of the not fun data, but we do as part of our dashboard. For each project, for each contract, we give the team basically what we call the banana curves. And so just, if you haven't seen a banana curve before, if you're below the line, it means you're behind schedule. You're above the line, you're definitely ahead of schedule. Most projects will run here in that band. And so you see this is the freeway project. We're within that, in that range. We've spent more than half of the project budget. We've got about $3 million of contingency left, and you can see here the target schedule. So we're running about 6 months behind just on the freeway piece compared to what we committed to when we let the contract. And the reason is we had some struggles with the foundations. There was different geotechnical conditions. Those columns, or some of those foundations, are about 240 feet deep. When we got to 240 feet, they didn't really behave like we thought they were going to behave. And so it took us about 6 months to work with the contractor. Things are up and running, and we've mitigated that risk moving forward. So,
Alan, you said
Sure.
you saved time by eliminating the offshore disposal.
yeah.
What was the solution or the alternative that you went to?
So they regraded some of the lagoon. They redesigned the lagoon to not require so much dredging. Also, the pit was consolidating a little bit faster than we thought, because it's all kind of muck. You take about, I think it's about 20% solids and 80% water, and you pump that from the dredge into the pit. And so it was a little bit of a engineering guesstimate on how fast that material was going to consolidate. It consolidated a little bit faster, and so we didn't need as big a pit. This is the restoration project. The money we saved actually went back into the contingency, so that's why the contingency is a little bit higher than we actually started. As we get closer, we can end up bringing that up back to the EMP. This is the Coastal Rail Trail project. So you'll look at this below the line, yet I'm having a ribbon cutting tomorrow. We've caught up. This is about 4 or 5 weeks behind, so they've caught up. Part of the original delay was this job is very closely tied to the rail project, and the rail project has very specific windows that we can do work on the rail because we have to close it. Absolute work windows, we can't do it in the summer. We had a slight delay on the rail, and it affected the bike path, but we've ended up catching up. And then this is the express lane project that we just broke ground on, so we're just early on in the project, about 10%. Opportunities and risks. This is something else that the team tracks as part of our health dashboard. So in the opportunity side, we did talk about, last time we were here with the board, we talked about the possibility of advancing the lagoon job. We're able to commit to that now. We're now working with the California Transportation Commission to try to get their funds advanced so that we can break ground on that last piece between Palomar Port and 78 sooner. Can't commit to that yet, but we are working on it, so we want to let you know. We're also working with the state to attract some additional operations funds. We call it SHOP money, and if we get that, we can build some additional auxiliary lanes as a part of the project. Those are probably some of the high points. Originally, when we visioned the project, we thought we would move to congestion pricing, express lanes like we have on I-15, probably next decade. We're looking at possibilities of advancing that into this decade, so we're studying that as well. On the risk side, really 2 major risks left. We've got more than half of the foundations done. Foundations are always probably our riskiest thing, along with utility relocations. Utility relocations are done. We've got about 7 foundations left to do. Once we tear down the existing structures, we'll be able to build those new structures, the 7 remaining, and then we'll retire that risk as well. And then lastly, that last segment, depending on when we're able to get funding for it, construction cost escalation, inflation of just contractors' prices. And that's why we're trying to get it out there sooner than later. But we'd like to track that as a risk. So in the next 6 months, what will you see? You'll see traffic moved over to the new structures as soon as we get those completed. You're going to see some new active transportation improvements under Santa Fe and Encinitas undercrossings. We're working on those to improve the east-west connectivity. And then the dredging of the last piece of the lagoon will be finished, and we'll move on to replanting the lagoon. So those are what we're looking for in the next 6 months. Hopefully you've also seen our 55-mile-an-hour program. And that's a program designed to improve the safety of the traveling public and the employees, Caltrans employees and the contractor employees. So we worked with the communications team of Sandag, and we did a really robust outreach and tried to explain to folks, why it's in their best interest. Basically, our slogan is slow down to get you there faster. Because when you end up in an accident, the whole freeway bogs down and you're late for at least an hour. So it's been effective. We've seen about a 7 to 10 mile-an-hour speed reduction out there right now. So we keep it up. And I think you're going to see more and more of this throughout the state and the county as projects come online. So with that, that kind of wraps up our health report. We feel like we're in a good place. We're about half done with the whole portfolio of projects. Any questions? Any questions?
I have some notes. We can go.
Relating to the cost escalation and CMGC, I'm just not, it's newer to me and not familiar. How does it work contractually with the contractor not in this type of thing when, generally, big picture, like where are there opportunities to adjust in that contract?
So a couple things. One is as we deliver the project to 100% and we start the pricing, we end up having an independent cost estimator who the state, or actually in this case the state hired, and they provide us an estimate of, and it's retired contractors, and they give us their best thoughts on what that price should be, and then they help negotiate with the prime about an actual price. During that time, you're going back and forth with RFIs to better understand the assumptions. And so I think one of the big benefits of CMGC is getting buy-in on those assumptions prior to pricing it. So there's a lot of unique specifications working in the marine environment, and so the contractor can hear directly from the regulatory agencies about expectations, and we're not leaving that up to guess. Then they price it and we argue about it in construction. Let's do that arguing before we agree on a price. So those are some of the benefits. Then when change happens, like those lagoon, foundations, you understand the basis for their price. And so it's much easier to adjust the price. And so when we've taken scope out, we knew how they priced it originally. So we felt we got fair value in taking scope out. Same is true when we add scope. We know how they costed it originally. It's an open book estimate.
And then like a phase like the one you haven't let yet, like sixth contract or something, as time goes on and materials costs change or things, then there's a basis to, there's a factual baseline to adjust their, is that easier then to adjust if things have gone up between some earlier budget?
So we haven't begun pricing that project yet, so I mean it's subject to whatever the price of materials.
Those are engineers' estimates at this point until you get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question on the restoration. You opened it up to title.
We did.
Is there a requirement now that somebody has to go in and make sure that that's always open, or?
So the permit allowed us to close the water, to close the outlet for certain periods, and then it's monitored based on the health of the water, and then we work with the contractor to release it. Okay, so why we did that was so that we could float the dredge around and move the dredge, and it needed to have enough water in it so that the dredge could move. Now that we're finished with the central and the eastern, and don't have the dredge there, that's why it's much more, it's going to be open to tidal fluctuation. There could be times where we have a sluice gate there, we have a berm there, and there could be times where we want to reclose it. but it's not going to be the durations that we've had over the last year.
So is there any risk that sand's moving in there on its own and blocking that sluice gate, or?
No, because, I mean, there are requirements for them to monitor that, and
They being?
FSSW, the contractor, as well as our inspectors. And there's been times where we have already cleaned out that mouth several times as the winter storms have closed it.
And then the plantings and do you have requirements for like endowment and taking care of it over a certain number? I'm used to Edison and the Songs project, and they're required to do it over the course of the Songs operating life, which is 32 years.
Right.
Is that a requirement on this, and who pays for that?
So the plan establishment, there are what we call plan establishment requirements, and we have to get them up to certain thresholds for the plan establishment to be considered complete, right? So those thresholds have to be met, and that threshold is like sustainability and coverage and that sort of thing. So we can't leave until those coverages are achieved. And then after that, there's been an endowment set up for dredging for all the lagoons in order to keep the mouths open. And so that's been part of the EMP contribution to the project, Transnet's contribution. So one of the things I would just tout, right, that's worked, I think, really well with the resource agencies is they identified the needs of each lagoon, and they allowed the region to highlight what those needs were and fund those specific needs. And so some lagoons needed just long-term maintenance and dredging. Other lagoons needed purchasing of a right-of-way and that kind of stuff. So it's been much more focused.
Any other questions?
Alan, I'm curious, what kind of addition to capacity does the double tracking provide? Can you actually characterize that in, at least the theoretical frequency of trains if we decided to run them goes from A to B, or?
So, and Jim,
I realize this may not be it's not a construction.
I would say that it's a system of improvements. So individually, we're not going to get higher frequency by just one project. We need to.
Right, I understand it's a system,
projects.
right, yeah.
But we are going to get better reliability even from one spot improvement.
Let me try, and you can.
Okay.
Right now, we've been doing a number of double track projects over the years. NCTD's goal, but they actually need some funding for 2 train sets, is basically the near-term goal is to get the frequency of the coaster to every 30 minutes. They'll need 2 train sets. So that's the money Hassan talked about, federal, states, and transit dollars to program the $300 million. That's among the projects that are being considered. But yeah, the ultimate goal is not just to double track for double track's sake, but to double track in order to run more service.
And so the 30 minutes is upon completion of the system-wide?
No, I think once they get, these things are all, they can still run on a single track system, and we can have more than two-thirds of our
Yeah,
system.
sort of. I would think just sort of mathematically, each segment you double track gives you some theoretical capacity.
It's theoretical. What it does is it really improves your reliability.
Got
so
it, okay,
your ability of a train that's starting in San Luis Obispo to show up at the exact right time in the double track area, many miles away, is a lot less. So the more double track you have, the more reliability you have. Therefore, the more ability you have the more higher frequencies of the trains.
Got it.
Okay. So it's a very iterative process.
Thanks.
That's what they're waiting on now, is actually train sets to add capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you. The new plan is going to affect the trains, and I'm very curious what the Delmar Trench is and what the details of that are going to be. Okay. Item number 14, the Commute Behavior Survey.
Hi, good morning. My name is Krista Ayala, and I'm a regional planner with our Transportation Demand Management team here at Sandag. So today I'm here to share the results from a survey that we conducted last year called the Commute Behavior Survey. So this isn't the first time that we conducted this survey. The first was actually conducted back in 2013. And for this effort in 2018, we actually partnered with the Riverside County Transportation Commission to expand the survey to include more questions around the impacts of shared mobility, technology, and park and ride use in our region as well as the Western Riverside population. This is a stated preference survey, which is a little bit different from a traditional travel survey, which typically just acts as a trip diary and collects very detailed information around the types of trips that were taken, trip distance, trip length. And our stated preference survey allows us to not only build the commuter profile, but to get more insight as to the motivations for taking that trip, opinions around the mode that was taken, and hypothetical incentives that might encourage someone to try something else. And that information is not only useful for marketing and outreach, TDM programming here at Sandag, but it's also used to inform regional transportation modeling efforts. And this survey in particular is going to be used in the next iteration of the regional transportation model to calibrate the results from the model. So what you see on the slide here is the entire survey area that we surveyed. Over half of our van pools come from the Western Riverside region, and we see a lot of benefit in expanding the survey boundaries past our own county lines to include the commuting population from Western Riverside, because it's just a portion of the population that contributes a significant amount of travel on our region's highways, especially along the I-15. The survey was conducted last year, and we collected responses from over 4,000 working adults here in San Diego and Western Riverside. About a third of those respondents were from Western Riverside and the rest from San Diego. The survey was available in English and Spanish, and we collected results using a mixed method approach via telephone, and then also collected responses online. And the full detailed report is linked, I believe it's page 99 on the packet. And if you had a chance to read the 120+ page report, you'd know that there's a lot of detailed information in it. For purposes of today's presentation, I'm really going to focus on the travel behavior pieces, what might encourage someone to try something else, and the impacts of technology, especially because there's a lot of common themes in what we've been discussing in the past few weeks with the 5 big moves and the regional vision. So the survey starts by profiling commute behavior. And remember, these are responses from both commuters in San Diego, but also the Western Riverside area. And driving alone is by far the most popular commute mode, with around 84% of respondents indicating that it's their primary mode. 6% indicated that they use public transit primarily to get to work, and then around 5% indicated that they use carpool. What you'll notice towards the bottom of this chart here is we have on-demand rideshare listed as a mode. Back in 2013, when we conducted the survey, services like Uber and Lyft were around, but they just weren't as popular to commute to work. Fast forward a few years later, and we have 0.6% of people saying that they're using the service to get to work every day. And even though that number might seem small, just in a short amount of years, the number of respondents using these services has already advanced and caught up to the number of people that are van pooling to work every day. And the van pool program, we've been operating for over 20 years. So you can really see how technology has just rapidly advanced adoption of some of these newer services.
Hey, Crystal, before you leave this, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Is there any way to reconcile this? I'm just all your 6% public transport number from what we tend to hear pretty frequently is the more like 2% number?
Yeah, well, because our survey sample included commuters from both San Diego and Western Riverside, Western Riverside commuters tend to exhibit higher adoption of transit services for getting to places like Los Angeles and San Bernardino. So that is included in that number, which inflates the percentage of transit users.
Got it, okay.
And this was just commute trips that you're surveying?
Right, we're only serving commuters.
Not total.
One more question to it. It included those that use public transit to Los Angeles and San Bernardino. This wasn't just focused between San Diego and Riverside. Okay.
No. Yeah, so we sampled respondents in the entire Western Riverside area, and then we're able to capture the percentage that are coming here, going to LA or San Bernardino. We also use the survey as an opportunity to gauge where we are with teleworking. 12% of respondents indicated that they typically work from home. Back in 2013, when we asked this question, we asked it a little bit differently, but it did go up slightly from around 11% in 2013. And so because we're able to collect information from commuters in San Diego and Western Riverside, we're able to glean really insightful information around intra and inter-regional travel and some of the differences and nuances between those types of trips. And so with respect to where people work, a majority, if not all, 97% of respondents in San Diego said that they also work in San Diego. So a lot of that travel is happening within county lines. On the other hand, just about half of commuters, respondents in Western Riverside said that they also work in Western Riverside. So almost half of respondents in Western Riverside are leaving the county to get to work. About a fourth of those are coming down to San Diego. So what does an average trip look like for a respondent in our survey sample? Regarding just the San Diego respondents, they indicated that a typical travel day for them was around 16 miles and 30 minutes one way to work. That respondent from Western Riverside traveling into San Diego has a much higher commute, traveling around 52 miles and over 70 minutes to work one way. And just to put that into context, 52 miles, it's just about the distance from Temecula to UTC.
That's across all modes?
Yes, this is across all modes. And although they're enduring much longer commutes in both terms of distance and time, what's really interesting is that the commuters traveling from Western Riverside into San Diego exhibited a lower drive-alone rate and much higher rates of carpooling and vanpooling in the region, which can likely be attributed to the availability of the I-15 managed lanes and the ability for travelers to access HOV lanes during peak congestion hours if they're carpooling and vanpooling for free. So we know that people are driving alone. We know that some of them are doing very long commutes. We wanted to know, well, why do you choose to drive alone, or why do you choose to take transit or bike to work? And what we found is that the primary reason why respondents choose to drive alone is for convenience purposes, or that it's the fastest option, or their work schedule constraints. For everybody else, the primary reason was in response to cost. It was a cheaper option. You also see convenience have a major role in the decision for people to choose to commute alternatively, as well as avoiding traffic. A lot of the work that we do in transportation demand management is around educating users around the wide array of transportation options that are available. And for those that have the flexibility to choose how they want to get to work, to encourage them to use an alternative. And so what this reveals to us is that those that may have the flexibility to commute alternatively to work are really not enticed by cost. What's really going to get them to shift is having services that are just as convenient, just as fast and reliable as driving alone. So let's talk about the people who are driving alone. What are the types of things that might get them to try something else? 30% of the respondents who are currently driving alone said that they would be interested in using transit to get to work rather than driving alone. Almost half said that they'd be interested in using some type of shared mode, whether that be an on-demand rideshare service like Uber or Lyft, or traditional carpool or vanpool service. And then 10% said they'd be interested in biking or walking to work instead of driving. And with regard to the specific conditions or factors that might encourage them to actually make the switch, across all the modes, across all of the drive-alone respondents, there was a lot of interest in having a competitive travel time, or being able to get to work just about the same amount of time as driving alone. Supportive infrastructure was also top of mind, especially for those who were interested in biking or walking to work, and having easy and convenient access to and from transit. Some of these operational improvements, service improvements, were important, but so were programmatic improvements, like having a monetary incentive for not driving to and parking at work, or having a guaranteed ride home to get home in case your vanpool leaves early or you miss your last bus.
Excuse me, by supportive infrastructure, would that be things like showers at work for people who bike, or things that are beyond Sandag's ability to control, or?
This supportive infrastructure was more related to actual things on the ground, so like dedicated lanes for bikes. Yeah.
HEB lanes, things like that.
And when we're talking about the commuting population here, so when we talk about programmatic offerings, the most successful way to encourage employers to use some of these programs is by implementing commuter benefit programs. For the employer, commuter benefit programs not only encourage your employees to commute alternatively, but it saves them money. For employees, it allows them to reduce the burden of commuting to work every day. Here in San Diego, commuter benefit programs are operated on a voluntary basis. So the Sandag TDM program, known as iCommute, has a robust employer services program that does work with employers all around the region to develop and implement commuter benefit programs. But again, we operate on a voluntary basis. Other parts of the state have certain air quality mandates or regulations requiring employers of a certain size to implement commuter benefit programs. And so knowing that we operate on a voluntary basis, the results you see here are fairly consistent with that. Almost 4 out of 10 respondents said that their employer does not offer any type of commuter benefit amenity or program. Of the ones that do, the most popular one were on-site facilities for like showers or lockers for people that bike and walk to work. Around 30% of respondents said that their employer does have that on-site. Second most popular were priority parking for carpools and van pools. And then to round out the top 3, we have free or discounted transit passes. A small percent of the respondents indicated their employers offer them. When we're talking about commuter benefit programs, one of the most powerful strategies is parking management. Several studies suggest that the availability of parking and the cost of parking are significantly associated with mode choice and car ownership. So 88% of respondents indicated that parking is free at work, which is consistent with what we saw in the previous slides with 84% of people driving to work. So you start to see those correlations kind of more clearly. A few weeks ago, you all heard from Colleen on the 5 big moves and the work that we're doing as part of the regional vision. Really at the core of the 5 big moves is use of technology to not only optimize the transportation system, but to expand mobility choices. And so in order to better position ourselves to leverage technology, incorporate it, it's knowing how people are even using technology to access transportation information is key. And national estimates of smartphone ownership say that around 8 out of 10 US adults own a smartphone. Our survey revealed that about 9 out of 10 respondents are using a smartphone every day. And what they're using for, unsurprisingly, I think some of the top reasons for using a smartphone are navigation related, so checking traffic conditions, getting driving directions. Then again, in the top 3, you see requesting a ride from an on-demand rideshare service. So we see how respondents are adopting use of these on-demand services on a daily basis, which really gets at the idea of mobility as a service. And that's the idea that you can provide a wide range of transportation options, both public and private, with a click of a button through a mobile app, allowing you to plan, book, and pay for all of your transportation services in one place. And when we proposed that to respondents, the response was overwhelmingly positive. About 90% expressed interest in the availability of such an app to allow them to plan their trips. So I know I just powered through a lot of information, and there's certainly a lot more in the detailed report, but I just want to take the last few minutes to highlight some of the key takeaways. And the first being is that commute choices are really guided by 2 main factors, and that's convenience and competitive travel time. In order to encourage the use of alternative travel options, be it train, carpool, or pooled services, we really need to shift the focus on improving the reliability and the speeds of the services so that they truly are attractive and they truly are competitive to driving. Having services that operate optimally though are only going to get you part of the way there. Pairing those operational improvements with programmatic offerings, employer-led initiatives, TDM ordinances, parking management strategies are really critical in actually encouraging the public to adopt some of these services. And then the last piece is I talked about technology, and it's a huge part of the 5 big moves. And a lot of the work that our team has been doing is around mobility hubs, which is one of the 5 big moves. So the survey results were really key in validating a lot of the work that we've been doing around that, and hope to now start exploring opportunities to pilot mobility hubs and to be able to demonstrate how you can integrate technology, integrate new mobility services to improve access to transit and just expand mobility choices overall. So that concludes my presentation. I know this was a lot of information, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
I think you mentioned, because San Diego, our region doesn't have a mandatory for business to participate, but there was some type of support system for that. Could you, for a business to reach out to, or
yeah,
or you, or what was that again?
Yeah, the iCommute program here at Sandag. It's the Sandag TDM program is branded as iCommute. We work with employers throughout the region to develop and implement commuter benefit programs. So we'll have an on-site meeting to learn about what the employer might be interested in. We survey the employees to understand how they're commuting to work. And based on those survey results, we can then come back with a trip reduction plan to help the employer meet some of their goals, reducing drive-alone rate, increasing the share of employees that are biking or carpooling to work. And we'll help facilitate on-site events, encourage van pooling, we'll distribute transit passes through the Transit program. So we have a lot of resources available at our disposal, and a couple hundred, a little bit more than a couple hundred of employers are actively participating in our program.
Is there a criteria for size of business for participating in that, or anything?
No, we'll work with any willing employer who wants to.
You run a business, don't you, Kai? You should.
Okay. So I can see there's some self-serving, but I'm generally curious. But yeah, absolutely.
I utilize that iCommute services every year for our fair time employees at the fairgrounds. They're great. They do exactly what you're saying. They come out, they survey, they'll hook up people that are in certain areas so they can do carpools. And there's a new program with Waze that they're offering. It's really a great service. Take advantage of it.
Just a couple, and I apologize, Crystal, you may have mentioned, but where in the organization do you reside?
We are nestled under the operations department.
No, I mean, like not physically, but like within, org chart wise.
Yeah, we're under operations.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, it's really fascinating information. I never realized that this kind of stuff was going on. So it's really a great presentation. One thing I was curious about is if you did any of a deeper dive into the fact that it was curious to me that half of the commuters said they'd be interested in rideshare, but only 30% in transit. And just curious if you dug any deeper into what makes rideshare more appealing for those other 20% versus transit, what the perceptions might be, or if there's learning that can be helpful.
We didn't necessarily dive deeper into perhaps why they chose to, but we were able to build profiles on who the typical person who might be able to adopt transit or adopt carpool or van pooling. And what we see is that people who are currently driving alone are more likely to use a rideshare service first before considering the adoption of transit.
It's the demand responsive nature of the rideshare services, like door to door.
So it's sort of a last mile-ish kind of thing in a way?
No, for the full trip, but it's just, with transit you have to get to the transit stop. The amount of time that it takes to get from point A to B is typically longer, where an on-demand rideshare service will pick you up in front of your home, will drop you off at your place of employment, and there's no stops in between unless you're using a pooled service.
So because people are really wanting something that's convenient and has competitive travel time, they see rideshare as providing that more so than typical public transit service.
Got it, thank you.
That was great.
Yeah, that's very good.
Thank you.
Quarterly finance report, item number 15, Jim and Andre. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
So good morning. This is a quarterly financial market update that we bring to you on a quarterly basis. And there really hasn't been any changes to our debt or investment portfolio since the last quarter. I guess the same cannot be said for the equity markets. We've really had a roller coaster ride for the last couple of quarters. Back in September, we were at all-time highs. Then by the end of the year, December, we basically had a correction where most of the major indices were down by 20%. I think a lot of that had to do with China and U.S. tensions, along with the Federal Reserve continuing to increase rates. Fast forward to January, a little bit of a change in profile. The Feds decided that inflation was under control, so they weren't going to raise rates anymore, so the markets accelerated. In fact, we've had one of the strongest recoveries ever in the market, where we actually hit all-time highs just last month. So we don't really focus too much on the equity market, because obviously California code doesn't allow us to invest our portfolio in any equities. However, a lot of cues are taken to the bond market from the equity market, so we do keep an eye on it. And I think the one thing that we can say that's a little troubling in the bond market right now is if you look at the U.S. Treasury curve, it's slightly inverted between the 2-year and 5-year. Obviously, the 5-year typically should pay more interest than the 2-year, but that's not the case right now. There's a little inversion there. In fact, there was even a 1-day inversion between the 10-year and the 1-year. The reason why economists, and maybe Jim will talk about it a little more, they get concerned about that is typically over the last 50 years when this has happened, 7 out of 7 times it's been followed by a recession. However, economists think a little bit differently this time, and they think that a recession is not in the cards, but again, I'll let Jim kind of go over why they may think that. So nothing really to report as far as our portfolio, but one thing that we are working on currently is our next bond issuance. This is going to be slightly different than what you're usually used to seeing. Typically we borrow against Transnet, and we are a AAA rated entity. This time we're borrowing against our GANs, against our FFGA, I should say, which is our $1 billion that we're receiving from the federal government. Just in round numbers, we're going to be, the Mid-Coast project is $2 billion. $1 billion of it we're financing through, we've issued BANs, which is our bond anticipation notes. We've issued long-term bonds, and we're using pay-as-you-go sales tax. So that's our side, that's being paid by Transnet. The other $1 billion is being paid by the federal government. So far, we've received $330 million from them. And as you know, the Mid-Coast is going to be completed in about 2 years, but we're only receiving $100 million per year. So we're kind of drawing forward some of those monies that we're going to be receiving later, all the way through 2026. And so we're issuing approximately $330 million in what we're calling GANs, Grant Anticipation Notes. We've formalized the team about 3 months ago. We've been working on it. Wells Fargo is the lead investment bank on this. We'll actually come back next month and give you the size and structure, exactly what we're going to be doing. We're finishing up the bond documents. We'll be going to the TC and board this month to give them some kind of updates with the final update and figures probably in the June meeting. One of the things that is a little unusual in this transaction is one hasn't been done in the markets for over 15 years. In other words, we're borrowing money based on the federal government credit. Usually there's some kind of a backstop to that, but we're not offering Transnet as a backstop. We may put a certain dollar amount, approximately $28 million in bond reserves to pay for a couple of years worth of interest. I think one thing that we need to kind of let the market know is that 100% of FFGAs have been paid. Sometimes it's the timing that's an issue. For example, the first year we received 100 million, the second year we only received 50 million when we were expecting 100 million. The following year we received 100 million and then we got 80 million to make up for the 50 million that we didn't receive. So the problem of it mostly is timing, and so we're structuring our advanced issuance to take that into consideration. Also, we're used to AAA ratings. This will be probably a triple B plus or maybe even an A minus. But as far as rates are concerned, our overall portfolio is approximately 3.4% right now. This GAN issuance will be in the range of 2.85 to 3% depending on where we end up, because it's shorter. It's only going out for 7 years. And half the cost is actually paid by the federal government as far as the interest is concerned, because they're paying for half the project. So as I said, we'll come back next month with further details, because we're kind of working on them right now with our financial advisors and our lead banker. So unless you have any questions on...
Is there... Wells Fargo isn't Wells Fargo anymore, right? Or is there a change? I mean, has that impacted you guys at all? That hasn't Wells Fargo been acquired by somebody else? And
No, Wells Fargo is still independent. I think Wells Fargo has had in the past some issues with some of their the banking side.
Yeah.
But this is the investment banking division, which hasn't had any issues. Obviously, we did an RFP, and we do have other banks as core managers on it. Goldman Sachs is a core manager, as well as Citibank and JP Morgan. So, I mean, there's a team of 4, but Wells Fargo just kind of rose to the top a little bit, and they are the lead bank this time.
I was just curious, what accounts for the big swing in the amount that we actually get from the feds? When is the 100 million a year just sort of like an indication of, or there's not like a commitment, obviously, otherwise they'd be delivering on it? Why would the swings be that big, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, no, maybe I'll turn to Jose to answer that one.
So when we were negotiating with the Federal Transit Administration, we had to provide a financial plan that essentially showed the assumption of when we expected the federal government to provide the funding. And at the time they said, you really should not assume more than 100 million for your financial plan purposes. So we were asking for $1 billion. So essentially we had to assume, as part of that financial plan, that we would only get 100 million per year. And so that was...
Well, that part I get, but why
okay.
Yeah.
So as every year we have to go back to Congress and say, okay, our financial plan and our contract says, you know, that we should expect about 100 million to be appropriated by Congress. It depends on what we and all of the other recipients of full funding grant agreements are telling the FTA. Sometimes the FTA feels that other projects have a higher need. At the time that we only got 50 of the 100 million that we were expecting, we were just getting started. And there's been some discussion that perhaps the FTA felt that because we were just getting started, we didn't need as much. In fact, we could have used it. So that's why when they did that, we said, hey, wait a minute, you're causing us to have to borrow more money, and it's going to cause just a higher cost to the project, period. And so the subsequent year, we kept telling them that, and they said, okay, here's your 100 million, but we're going to try to get you more money. And so they made up the 50 that they didn't give us with an additional 30. So, but it's an annual discussion that we have to have, and the FTA takes our input plus the input of other FFGA recipients.
So then I guess my follow would be, it's just maybe a comment. It just seems curious that even with the potentiality of the fluctuation being fairly significant, that if we're talking about the federal government credit, that it would be rated as low as triple D. It just seems a bit of a curiosity to me.
Yeah, I think if we had a backstop to it, it would definitely be rated in the A. But I think the federal government on its own, and I think, unfortunately we've had, we're supposed to receive this 100 million, we received 50 million. Then we had a government shutdown. last year. If the government shuts down, you don't get paid, which is what we felt. We were delayed a little bit on getting our payment, and there's been sequestration. So I think, well, who's in the White House right now? I think things that we're getting feedback from investors and from rating agencies that are kind of indicating in that area. So yeah, I'm with you. You'd expect we'd have higher, but it's just, I think there's a lot of risks on the table. And you know, the one thing that the bond market loves is certainty, and we don't have 100% certainty going in this. When we do a transit bond, we tell them every 6 months you're going to get paid a certain amount and be paid. If there's a delay here, we're setting up certain mechanisms to ensure that bondholders get paid, like doing the debt service reserve fund. We're actually going to have two debt service reserve funds, one that comes out of bond proceeds, one that Sandag's going to offer. So we're trying to mitigate some of the risks that they have, but at the end of the day, they're a little cautious based on the environment that we're at today.
And there's not a presumption of a moral obligation on the part of Sandag in an instance like this, like, you know, like Fannie Mae tends to get that sort of presumption of moral obligation by the federal government to backstop, even if it's not legal.
I think that's a great question. I think at the end of the day, investors will realize that we're 10 years into a program that's going to go on for 30 years. So if the federal government delays payments and we don't have enough money, is Sandag going to let investors hold it back? The answer is no. We're going to step up, right? We're going to do the right thing, but we can't write that in the documents. The documents are going to be standalone, and if you buy these bonds, you have to have full faith in the federal government that they're going to make payments.
And part of the story, you know, as Andre mentioned, is that despite having had government shutdowns, changes in administration, you know, all kinds of crises, all have been paid according to you know the contract. What has varied is, you know, maybe you thought you were going to get this annual amount and you got a different amount, or maybe you thought that you were going to get it in this month of the year, but you got it 6 months after because of something that happened. But ultimately, all of them have been paid.
Do you have a guesstimate as to how much more expensive you expect the BBB would be versus if you were, you know, if it were the full Sandag credit? What's the kind of spread there is?
Yeah, so we've vetted that with investment bankers, and in today's environment, because credit spreads are pretty compressed, I mean, rates are pretty low as it is, there's about a 10 basis point difference for each notch that you go up. So for example, between a BBB and BBB plus, there'd be 10 basis points, like maybe 280 versus a 290. So if you go all the way up to maybe, if you were all the way up to AAA, take 10 basis points, so we may be at a 2.2 versus we may end up at like a 2.8 or 3. So, you know, again, in today's environment, the rates be where they are, pretty low. It doesn't cost that much incremental interest.
Thank you.
It was the retirement division they sold Wells Fargo. I was mistaken. I was thinking it was.
Yeah. So I'll hand it over to Jim to talk about
the overall economic environment update. About 6 months ago, there were kind of clouds massing on the economic horizon. Economists were expecting almost a 50% chance of a recession in late 2019 or early 2020. Those clouds have dissipated a little bit. As Andre said, the equity markets have bounced back. They're down a little this week due to what I might call erratic trade policy. But they're still up at about, the Dow Jones is about at 26,000. So that's healthy. Also, the U.S. 10-year Treasury. What you want to see is that line going down. That's a measure of consumer or investor confidence, I should say. So if the 10-year Treasury is low, and you see that investors are confident, they're staying out of Treasuries. So that it's about 2.54. It's actually 2.45 today, which is even better. And as Andre said, the federal funds rate has not been rising. The Fed has held off on any further jumps in the federal funds rate, which is fairly good news for the economy. They haven't suggested any cuts. The president has suggested they might think of doing some cutting, but they're not looking to do that. And they're really not looking to raise rates either, because their inflation index, their target rate is about 2%, and we're not hitting 2%. We're about 1.86 now. So that's good news that inflation is low. And one of the reasons that it's good news inflation is low is unemployment is also low. These numbers are actually from February, not December, and I just got the March and April numbers. U.S. unemployment continues to decline. We're at about 3.6. We're about 3.6 in April. It's ticked up a little in San Diego to about 3.7, but those numbers on a month-to-month basis are a little noisy. These are still really, really historically low unemployment rates, both U.S., San Diego, and California. You're also seeing some of the slack in the labor market be removed. About a year ago, we had very low unemployment. We weren't seeing much wage movement, but we've seen new entrants or re-entrants into the labor market, which can cause unemployment to jump a little as people who were not looking for work previously have re-entered the labor market and are actively looking for work. The nice thing is that we keep seeing, this is our most recent data, we keep seeing wage rises here in San Diego County of over 3%. And when you have inflation that's below 2 and wages rising over 3, that's good news. We've seen over the last decade, we have not seen much real wage growth for San Diegans or people throughout the country. So it's really positive economic news to see the wage growth with inflation so low. Housing prices are also starting to moderate, or not grow so fast, I should say. They're not coming down at all. But we haven't seen much of a jump in the last year in housing prices here in San Diego. One wonders how much higher they could actually go. But we're seeing, but we're still at a point where only about 27 to 30% of San Diego households could afford a median price home today. Were they required to buy one? Our construction industry is not quite meeting demand for new housing. We'd expect to see, we'd want to see about 12 to 15,000 new units a year. The last 3 or 4 years, we've seen about 10,000 new housing units. Much of that multifamily come online, so housing prices, I wouldn't expect them to go down, but they're certainly moderating, which is nice. And our Transnet revenue are, we had a healthy jump last year. The year that we're in, FY19, we're expecting about $301 million in Transnet revenues. We might do a little better than that. And we're looking for about a 4.5% jump next year, and that would include some online sales tax revenues that we were not being able to collect previously. We will be able to collect as of April 1st. The state has started collecting those, so that's a bit of good news for our revenue situation as well. So that's my report. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
I was intrigued at your interest rate forecast schedule. I just quote from Bloomberg, and a conventional wisdom from the newspapers these days is that the idea of one or certainly multiple fund increases is probably no longer feasible. But this chart implies that there's still arguably 225 points increases to come.
Yeah, I think this is the Bloomberg, since I've been doing these reports, generally they always show interest rates going up a little bit higher. But if you were to look from probably 2 quarters ago, they were significantly higher. So they've moderated them down.
I think it's, with the economic news getting a little better, we had, GDP growth in the first quarter was surprisingly high, and the kind of a much lower proportion of economists looking for a recession in the next 18 months to 2 years. It would be interesting to see how the Fed responds to that. That's good news. It might lead them to continue to raise interest rates, but we have low inflation. That's their main concern. They want to keep inflation low. So, I think that's one of the more difficult ones would be to forecast, would be what the Fed is going to do in 2019. It was a lot clearer in 2018. The economy was getting better, inflation was peaking up a little, so you knew the Fed really telegraphed what they were going to do. Now they're under some political pressure to lower rates. They have low inflation, but they also have better economic news coming. So that's going to be an interesting one to follow.
Andre, on the barring alternative you have, and to take advantage of the government support, you need a backup to really get the full advantage. aren't there people in the business that can find their risk rewards within that spread between AAA and triple B?
Well, one of the things that we're also doing is talking to Assured Guarantee, who's one of the larger remaining bond insurance companies out there today, to potentially insure at least the principal and interest payments. We actually have a presentation to them coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, there are alternatives that we're looking to enhance.
Question what the rates are, what somebody sells you for. A lot of people don't realize that when you think about like a government guarantee, the devil's in the details. Everybody in the government operates under the Anti-Deficiency Act, and they cannot make a payment unless they have an appropriation. Not the promise of appropriation next year. If you don't have it this year, you can't make a payment. And I'm surprised. Well, you mentioned that there's never been a missed payment over time, but you got your ups and downs. That's because they can't pay it. But I think there'd be a market issue. If you've never had a default and I got enough money, I'll go into business because I've never got a default and I can make that spread. The devil's in the details. If everybody just says it's a government guarantee, end of story, it's far from it.
Yeah, actually on that note, just out of curiosity, would you anticipate the spread would be on the actual GAN cell itself?
Spread to MMD?
To the underwriters.
Oh, that's negotiated up front. In other words, how much they're going to get per bond?
Yeah.
Yeah, we negotiate that up front, and I believe in this deal it's $1.75 per bond they're going to be getting.
Gotcha. Okay. So you compare the 60 basis point spread difference between triple B and triple A versus the $1.75 bond as an underwriter, and you'd think, yeah, right. There's some money to be made by some.
Do it, so it doesn't matter.
No, I know. Yeah. Interesting.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Good.
Next meeting is Wednesday, June 12th. You're not going to be able to make it, let Ariana know. I will be here.
I make a formal motion that we thank John.
Oh, may I say a very brief comments? I've been thinking about Washington's speech to his troops at the end of the war. But I just want to say just a couple things, if I may, brief.
Of course.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Caroline, for bringing some goodies here in honor or of my retirement from this group. That's the sort of thing that a lady thinks of. You know, we guys don't think of that. So
Stuart gets credit. He let me know that this was your last
Okay.
meeting. I give him a lot of credit.
But I did no baking. So.
All right. No, I have to say that you know I've been here 8 years now, and I'm going to miss you guys. This has been one of the most interesting and rewarding endeavors that I've ever taken on in my lifetime. And please tell that to all future candidates.
Oh, sure.
Sure,
We'll put it in the
we
announcement.
have meetings and people talk, and there's a lot of that. But I have to say, I respect everybody that I've worked with. I respect every member of the ITOC. I respect every staff member. You folks have been so transparent. It's hard to remember that we are oversight, and there is a distinction, as you correctly pointed out, Stuart, that we are oversight, that we represent the taxpayers. But I really respect your transparency. You've just been fabulous, and I thank you for the opportunity to serve. And now you can applaud.
If you really miss us, you can always come join us for lunch. You don't have to attend the meeting. Just
Free lunch.
Come with this.
Okay.
We might have an opportunity to find the audit committee.
Let me think about that. Okay.
With that, we are adjourned.
I'd like to pass a motion that we hereby invite Jonathan back every other month.
Every other month. All right. I'll
participate as
committee member emeritus.
A concerted will come out and give a 3-minute speech every meeting. Awesome.
Oh,